I never thought my return to civilian life would begin with a slap. Let me rephrase that. I never thought a man in a fake police vest would slap a retired federal judge in broad daylight, then accuse her of obstruction. But that's exactly what happened. My name is Eleanor Monroe. I served 27 years on the federal bench, presiding over cases involving cartel bosses, white-collar criminals, even the occasional corrupt politician. I wore the robe with pride. I enforced the law with precision. And when I retired, I just wanted peace. So I moved to a sleepy South Carolina cul-de-sac called Ridgepoint Estates. You know the type, bird baths in every yard, mailboxes shaped like eagles, neighbors who smile too wide but peek through blinds the second your grass hits 3 inches. It was Stepford meets suburbia. And I thought, finally, a place to breathe. I lasted 3 weeks. On a Thursday morning, I was driving back from the farmer's market. Local eggs, a jar of blackberry preserves, and a tiny ceramic chicken I didn't need but somehow bought. It was 9:17 a.m. when I turned onto Sycamore Lane, the only road leading to my street, and found it blocked. 3 men stood shoulder to shoulder in the middle of the asphalt, matching navy vests that said HOA Community Enforcement. 2 wore mirrored sunglasses like they just stepped out of a bargain bin action movie. 1 had a clipboard. The third, a tall, bald man with a crooked smile and arms like cinder blocks, had a taser holster on his hip and a pair of aviators he didn't bother to remove as he stepped toward me. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to turn around," he said flatly. "I live here," I replied, still seated behind the wheel. "What's the problem?" "You're in violation of restricted access," he barked. HOA Order 44C. No through traffic during maintenance operations. There were no cones, no signs, no maintenance crew. "Where's the posted order?" I asked. He scoffed. "You can talk to the board about that." I leaned out the window. "I am the board. Sunshine, judicial, federal, retired." That was when he made the mistake. The one that would ruin him. He stepped closer. I swear I saw the shift in his stance before it happened. His hand came up fast, flat and open. Crack! It landed across my left cheek. Not hard enough to knock me out, but hard enough to draw breath from the entire street. Someone gasped. Another neighbor opened their garage door and froze. A dog barked, then fell silent like even it knew something sacred had just been broken. I turned my head back to him slowly. My jaw didn't shake. My voice didn't crack. "Did you just strike a federal judge?" I said. He blinked. "What?" I said. "Did you just assault a judge of the United States District Court?" He took a half step back. "Lady, I don't care if you're the Queen of England. This is HOA property." That's when I stepped out of the car. No robe, no badge, just me, 63 years old, 5 feet 5 inches, and fueled by every ounce of fury the law had ever taught me how to control. "Listen closely, mister." I glanced at his chest patch. "Ray Delman. This road is public infrastructure. Your HOA has no authority to block it. And you just committed second-degree assault in full view of at least 5 witnesses." Ray didn't flinch. Not yet. He still thought he was in control. "I'll have your car towed if you don't move it," he said, raising his walkie like it was a gavel. "You're welcome to try," I said. "And when you do, I suggest you call a real officer. Because the next time you put your hands on someone, it won't be in Ridgepoint, it'll be in federal court." That's when he realized something wasn't right. Neighbors had started to gather. Phones were out. One woman whispered, "Is that the judge lady from Lot 6? Another said, "Oh my God. She prosecuted that racketeering case last year." Ray suddenly didn't look so sure of himself. But it was too late. That slap? It wasn't just arrogance. It was a match dropped into dry kindling. What he didn't know was that I still had connections. I still had my honorary badge. And now, I had intent. Because this wasn't just about one slap. It was about power. Pretending. and the HOA that thought it could act like a private army. They didn't realize they'd just woken the law from retirement. And I was ready to bury them in paperwork. Ray Delman didn't just make a mistake, he slapped a federal time bomb wearing a cardigan and orthopedic shoes. Because what Ray didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I wasn't just some frail retiree fumbling with a grocery bag of eggs and preserves. No. I was Eleanor Monroe. And for 27 years, I served on the United States District Court for the Southern District. My name's been cited in appeals. My rulings have survived Supreme Court scrutiny. And even in retirement, I still held what we call emeritus judicial status, which meant I could be called back to the bench with 24 hours notice. And trust me, I was ready. I didn't spend 3 decades navigating the snake pit of federal litigation just to be slapped across the cheek by a glorified neighborhood mall cop. You see, I know how power actually works. Ray? He thought power was a walkie-talkie, a pair of Oakleys, and a fake badge. But real power is knowing which law applies where, who enforced it last, and who hid the truth behind procedures. And more importantly, I wasn't alone. You remember that woman I mentioned at the farmer's market? The one who gave me the homemade preserves? She's not just a jam enthusiast. Her name is Anita Keller. She also happens to be the Chief Assistant Attorney General for the state. We go way back, Harvard Law. Class of '83. We've argued on opposite sides of the same courtroom, toasted over grand jury victories, and once shared a bottle of bourbon the night we both realized the system doesn't fix itself. You have to rip it open. So after I got back home, still seething, face still stinging, I made one call. Anita picked up after the second ring. "L?" she said. "He slapped me." I replied. "Who?" "Some HOA cop," I said. "Claims he's enforcing HOA Rule 44C. Blocked a public road. No signage. And then he hit me." Dead silence on the other end. Then Anita said the 3 most dangerous words I've ever heard her whisper. "Oh. They're done." Within 30 minutes, I had 5 emails, 2 case precedents, a scanned plat map showing the easement for Sycamore Lane, clearly publicly maintained, and a PDF of the Ridgepoint Estates HOA charter. And that's when I saw it. The charter was dated 2004. But I remembered from my property deed, Ridgepoint was incorporated in 2003. That gap, that tiny 1-year mismatch, it's a landmine. See, if the HOA was registered after the original subdivision filings, and if even one homeowner opted out of membership at the beginning, it nullifies forced enforcement unless they get unanimous reauthorization. And guess who was never part of the original HOA? Me. And 4 other homeowners at the far end of the cul-de-sac. Which meant HOA enforcement wasn't just excessive, it was illegal. I called city records. Spoke to an old contact, Mr. Leary, head of records and zoning. Within the hour, he confirmed what I suspected. The HOA never refiled when the neighborhood expanded. That meant dozens of properties, including mine, had been billed, fined, and harassed under fraudulent authority. It was quiet that evening. Too quiet. Neighbors walked their dogs a little faster. Ray's blue pickup truck didn't leave his driveway. I saw his porch light flicker but not go out. He knew something was coming, but he didn't know how close the hammer was. Because I wasn't coming for fines or apologies. I was coming for their existence. And when the law knocks on your door with a subpoena in one hand and a spotlight in the other, you better pray the judge doesn't know your first name. Spoiler, I did. I didn't just want revenge. I wanted a paper trail that screamed louder than any slap ever could. After confirming that Ridgepoint Estates HOA had no legal authority over my property, I did what any federal judge worth her salt would do. I opened a file folder. And then I opened another. And then another. See, HOA abuse isn't always loud. It doesn't always come with handcuffs or screaming. Sometimes it's quieter, written in fines tucked inside envelopes, rules slid under doors, and meetings held in driveways when nobody's watching. But I've read enough RICO case files in my life to recognize the signs. I requested the last 7 years of Ridgepoint HOA board minutes. Most HOA documents are public under South Carolina's Homeowners Association Act if requested properly. The board didn't know that I knew that. So when I sent in my formal homeowner request via certified mail with a 72-hour deadline, I expected two things: 1. Delays. 2. Panic. Instead, I got a Dropbox link. Sloppy. Too easy. It smelled like arrogance. Or guilt. Within hours, I was knee-deep in poorly scanned PDFs, emails between board members, and spreadsheets filled with entries like violation, trash can visibility, $75 fine, fence paint, non-compliant beige, $125, HOA patrol requested, Lot 9, Lot 22, Lot 31. They weren't just fining people. They were targeting them. Mostly older residents, widows, veterans, two families who didn't speak fluent English. Lot 22 caught my attention. The file said, persistent non-compliance, consider escalated measures. What the hell did that mean? I found out the next day when I spoke to Mr. Alvarez, the owner of Lot 22. He was 68, a retired machinist, born in Mexico, and had lived in Ridgepoint since 2005. When I knocked on his door, he hesitated to answer. He looked past me like he expected someone else to be lurking. I'm not from the HOA, I said. His shoulders relaxed, just slightly. We sat on his porch. I asked him about the persistent violations. He laughed bitterly. My fence was 5 inches too high, he said. They said it obstructed the neighborhood's visual harmony. He paid the fine. Then they said his patio furniture was unapproved. Another fine. He paid again. Then came the visit. 3 men, he whispered. One with a clipboard. The other 2 with those fake vests. Said if I didn't comply, they'd flag my home for structural inspection. Said they could recommend demolition for unsafe construction. That's when I knew this wasn't a neighborhood association. It was a neighborhood cartel. They weren't enforcing rules. They were manufacturing violations, then using intimidation to collect cash or silence. And the worst part? Most people didn't fight back. They were too scared. They didn't want to be labeled problem homeowners. One woman, a war widow named Esther from Lot 9, showed me a letter she received. It read, "Your lawn height has exceeded the community standard. Consider this your final warning before HOA cop intervention." She had saved it. Dated 2 months after her husband passed. Her yard had grown because she was grieving, not because she was defiant. This wasn't enforcement. It was extortion with a smile. I started mapping it out, literally. I created a digital board with pins marking every address that had received 3 or more violations in the last 5 years. It formed a pattern, a loop of targeted pressure, always circling the same cluster of homes, elderly, immigrant, or isolated. And in the center of that web, Ray Delman, head of enforcement. He wasn't just slapping people. He was running an entire shadow operation under the HOA banner. And the documents confirmed it. Meeting notes from 2019, create uniformed presence for community authority. HOA cop program approved. Budget allocated, $5.200 for vests, decals, and radios. No oversight. No legal basis. Just the board voting itself into power. This was beyond misconduct. It was systemic HOA fraud, with threats, financial abuse, and impersonation of public authority. I gathered everything. I printed the minutes. I highlighted entries. I created a binder. And when I flipped the final page, I looked at the cover I'd labeled in bold red ink, Ridgepoint HOA, Organized Deception and Civil Violations. 2016 to 2023. They slapped the wrong woman. And now I had the evidence to bury them in their own bylaws. If there's one thing corrupt people hate more than exposure, it's a paper trail leading right to their doorstep. And once word got out that I had won, detailing fines, threats, and a fake security force, Ridgepoint's HOA stopped pretending to be neighborly. They came after me. At first, it was subtle. A flyer showed up taped to my mailbox one morning. It wasn't from the board. It was anonymous, printed on cheap paper. The headline read, "Former Judge Spreads Misinformation, Eleanor Monroe Endangering Our Community." Below that, a blurry photo of me at the farmer's market. They'd cropped it so I looked like I was yelling at someone. The caption, "Aggressive behavior. Known history of conflict." It was laughable. Until it wasn't. Later that week, my mailbox was left open. Its contents soaked by the sprinkler system. Someone keyed the word tyrant into the side of my Prius. Then came the HOA's official notice, an envelope slipped under my door with no postage. Inside was a cease and desist letter, citing me for community disruption, defamation, and unauthorized surveillance. Let me say that again, they threatened to sue a federal judge for unauthorized surveillance of documents they themselves uploaded to Dropbox. I showed it to Anita, my friend at the AG's office, and she laughed so hard she nearly dropped her wine glass. "They're scrambling," she said. "You rattled the hive." But it didn't end there. One night, I noticed a white SUV parked across the street. Tinted windows. Engine idling. I walked outside, phone in hand, and pointed it straight at them. They drove off. Next morning, a printed photo was left at my front door. It was a shot of my 10-year-old grandson, Evan, leaving his after-school program. On the back, in blocky black Sharpie, "Retire for good. Or else." That was the moment the game changed. See, I'd lived my whole career knowing there were risks. I'd faced defendants with cartel ties, stalkers, even one lunatic who tried to mail a severed chicken foot to my office. But I'd never felt fear like I did staring at that photo. And then, something shifted. That fear, it turned to fury. I called Anita again. This time I didn't ask for advice. "I want federal eyes," I said. Now. She didn't hesitate. By 10 a.m., I was on a secured call with the Office of Inspector General, the U.S. Postal Inspector, and 2 DOJ compliance attorneys. I laid everything out: the HOA's fraudulent financial activity, impersonation of authority, the threats, and the escalation into targeted intimidation. They didn't laugh this time. That same day, the DOJ opened a preliminary review of Ridgepoint Estates Homeowners Association. I didn't stop there. I had surveillance cameras installed around my house, discreet, high-res, motion activated. I hired a private security consultant, an ex-Marine named Greer, who now teaches threat to escalation for federal judges. I had my grandson's school reroute his pickup protocol, and I notified the local precinct of the threats, forwarding them to Internal Affairs. I also issued a formal complaint to the South Carolina Bar Association, naming the HOA's legal counsel, who had knowingly endorsed unenforceable fines and ghostwritten HOA laws that didn't comply with state statutes. You'd think that would have made them back off. Instead, they tried to rewrite my past. A post appeared on a local Facebook group titled "The Real Eleanor Monroe." It claimed I'd once been investigated for ethical misconduct during a high-profile case. It was a lie. The file they cited was from 2004, completely exonerated, publicly closed, and so buried in case law it could only have been dug up by someone deliberately looking to weaponize my record. It backfired. A former colleague of mine, now an appellate court judge, posted a blistering reply, calling the smear campaign a disgraceful act of desperation by those afraid of accountability. Still, the damage was real. The tension in the neighborhood became thick and poisonous. Neighbors stopped waving. Some avoided eye contact altogether. But I didn't stop. I wasn't fighting just for me. I was fighting for Mr. Alvarez. For Esther. For every quiet homeowner who got a fake violation and paid it, thinking they had no other choice. The slap may have been what started this. But this fight, this was about power pretending to be law. And if they thought I'd retire quietly after that threat, they clearly never read my rulings. It started with a slap. It ended with a federal court order, 3 arrests, and the HOA president weeping in handcuffs on his perfectly trimmed lawn. By the time I was done, Ridgepoint Estates no longer had a homeowners association. It had a cautionary tale. After I triggered the federal review, everything moved fast. Faster than even I expected. Thanks to Anita and my contacts at the Department of Justice, we had gathered enough evidence to request an emergency injunction, something rarely granted unless there's proof of immediate harm or ongoing civil rights violations. I presented sworn affidavits from 6 homeowners, a binder of internal HOA communications, some of which were so jaw-droppingly illegal they almost made the judge laugh. And the most damning piece of all, body cam footage. See. One of the HOA cops wore a GoPro on his vest. Sloppy. Sloppy as dill. He forgot to disable the auto-upload to a shared Google Drive tied to the HOA's shared Gmail account. The footage captured Ray Delman, the man who slapped me, telling 2 other officers to pressure the old ones hard. They're less likely to lawyer up then. It showed him impersonating a police officer on camera, threatening a single mom with child safety citations if she didn't repaint her porch. That was enough. The federal judge signed the order by 3:43 p.m. on a Wednesday. Freeze all Ridgepoint HOA accounts. Seize electronic communications. Place the association under immediate legal supervision. At 6:15 p.m., U.S. Marshals arrived at the HOA clubhouse, a beige stucco monstrosity that always smelled faintly of stale coffee and unpaid dues. Ray Delman was there. So were 3 other board members, Claire Withers, secretary, Peter Mance, treasurer, and Donna Fielding, vice president, and full-time busybody. They didn't see it coming. Claire fainted. Peter tried to argue. Donna tried to film it like she was the victim. Ray? He ran. Only got as far as the koi pond behind the building before a marshal tackled him into the bushes. By sunset, Ridgepoint's leadership was in custody, charged with impersonating law enforcement officers, unlawful detention, financial fraud through coercive fines, civil conspiracy, and felony assault on a retired federal judge. That one was personal. The next day, we held a community town hall, this time under the supervision of a federal legal oversight committee. They met in the old clubhouse, now cleared of propaganda posters and cheap fake badge paraphernalia. I stepped onto the stage. Not in a robe. Not even in heels, just a clean suit, steady voice, and a stack of documents labeled Resolution Proposal, Ridgepoint Estates Independent Homeowners Cooperative, Post-HOA Reformation Plan. I wasn't there to take over. I was there to hand it back. One neighbor stood up, a woman I hadn't spoken to since moving in. She said, Are you really a judge? I nodded. She asked, Why didn't you just move away? And I told her the truth. Because if I did, this would keep happening. Somewhere else. To someone else. And they might not be able to fight back. Applause broke out. Not loud, but real. The Reformation Plan passed with 93% approval. The HOA charter was dissolved, legally, publicly, permanently. The neighborhood would transition to a co-op model, with legal protections, no forced fines, and an external third-party conflict mediator, not community enforcement. 3 months later, Ray was convicted. 18 months in state prison. Probation denied. His plea deal fell apart after prosecutors reviewed the footage of the slap. At sentencing, he looked at me. He didn't apologize. He didn't speak. He just blinked. Slow and hollow. Like a man trying to figure out how he lost everything to someone who didn't raise her voice, only the law. As for me, I didn't return to the bench. But the DOJ asked me to serve as a judicial consultant on HOA abuse and enforcement law, nationwide. Apparently, there's a growing need. Funny how one slap can echo louder than a gavel.